Look, dude, I know that there's a lot of stigma about being queer in the builder community, but you've just got to embrace who you are, okay? You've got to let those fears go. You've got to be honest to you, not only to them, but to yourself. You like women and men. And I know that it's really hard because you specialize in putting up polls for a living, and they could easily make just so many stripper jokes about you, but face facts, you're a bipolar. Bipolar, not just a coming out moment. Welcome back to the Little Grey Cells podcast, where I talk about the matters of the psychological mon ami. Today we will be looking at bipolar and the behaviorist approach. Now, what is the behavioralist approach, I hear you asking? Well, it focuses on learned behavior from association and reward. One of the key ideas is classical conditioning, which focuses on learned behavior from association. This was developed by Ivan Pavlov and his dogs, all of them gentlemen and scholars. Pavlov did this with dogs and a bell and food, but I'm going to do this with a dog that has already been conditioned, but that's just because she's so smart, and I trained her years ago. Introducing Sadie! Sit. They're pretty peppy. The neutral stimulus is saying the word sit. Sadie, stand up. No, Sadie. Stand. So you can see, saying sit. Pretend she's standing because she won't sit down. So pretend she's standing. Sit. Oh my god, she's still standing. Wow, how crazy. But if I say sit and give her a treat, this will condition her into hearing sit and thinking of a treat, so she's just gonna sit down. Sit. Oh my god, you sat down, good girl. Whoa, isn't she just like the smartest? And now look, she's standing back up again. She's standing back up again. So now, if I say sit, oh my god, she sits down without a treat. How crazy is that? Isn't that just insane? It's insane. It's crazy. That's because sitting down has now become... Saying sit has become the conditioned stimulus, and sitting down has become the conditioned response. You're a good girl, actually. Okay. Good kill! She's so smart. Another key idea is operant conditioning, which focuses on learned behavior from reinforcements and punishments. This was developed by B.F. Skinner and his rats, most of them gentlemen and scholars. The theory is that there are 4 ways to learn behavior. There is negative punishment, negative reinforcement, and positive reinforcement. Negative punishment is removing something to stop a behavior, whereas positive punishment is adding something to stop a behavior. Positive reinforcement is adding something to increase a behavior, and negative reinforcement is removing something to increase a behavior. But what does this have to do with bipolar? Let me tell you. A study was done in 2018 from PubMed Central by Lauren B. Alloy and Lynn Y. Aberson on bipolar. They did this by examining earlier studies on BAS with symptoms of bipolar. BAS is Behavioral Approach System, so BAS, or BAS, if you're nasty. They looked at how bipolar kicks in during mania and depression. They also looked at how a sensitive BAS correlates with addictive behaviors. Their studies showed that people with bipolar tend to have an overreactive BAS. This means that they tend to chase rewards more often than your average Joe. The symptoms of mania from this is having lots of energy, trying to achieve a lot of things, and less of a need for sleep. I cannot relate. I love sleep. A shut-off BAS can lead to depression symptoms like being tired, sad, or uninterested in things. They also found out that people whose BAS is more reactive tend to use drugs and alcohol more. This is because they are driven by rewards. During mania, people with bipolar's BAS is higher and their BIS, their behavioral inhibition system, is lower. This means that they chase rewards more and are less avoidant to negative things, which is the BIS. During depression, it's the opposite. The BAS is lower and the BIS is higher, meaning that they don't chase rewards as much and they are more avoidant of negative things. A study done by Alexander Roy Terpstra in 2018 from the University of British Columbia showed that bipolar traits may be closely linked with patterns of reward sensitivity, threat sensitivity, and conditioning. Alexander Hamilton.
Alexander Hamilton. My name is Alexander Hamilton.
Alexander Roy Terpstra did this study by looking at 2 other studies from other universities. He was writing a thesis. Jesus Christ. He was doing it for his PhD. The first study showed that higher hypomanic and depressive symptoms majorly predicted sensitivity to incentive rewards and a stronger classically conditioned response to threat-related cues. The second study showed that people with bipolar, characterized by being impulsive, having low self-control, and low achievement, had much weaker classically conditioned responses to reward and threat-related cues. It also showed that people with bipolar, characterized by having negatively affecting responses to stress and were more emotionally dysregulated, had a greater threat sensitivity. Additionally, it showed that people with bipolar had a tendency to go after and participate in experiences they would find stimulating while ignoring any risks. They also had a larger sensitivity to incentivized rewards and were less likely to make classically conditioned responses to threat-related cues. A study on bipolar was done in 2020 from PubMed Central by Anna von Meter because a yard is far too short. They got 50 participants that had an average age of 22. 72% were female. They got them to do computerized interpretation-based training, or IBT. 38 of the participants followed up 10 weeks after the experiment. The participants were split into 2 groups. There was the real IBT group, who practiced interpreting ambiguous faces as happy. And then there was the fake group that did a neutral version of the experiment that did not affect how they made judgments. After 10 weeks, the real group reportedly felt significantly less depressed than the fake group. The real group also felt they had gotten more support from their family after the training. The training helped them change how they choose to interpret emotions. Hedges, G equals 1.63, which I'm told is a big change. Individuals who learned faster had bigger drops in depression according to them and to clinician ratings. This shows how people with bipolar interpret emotions can affect their moods. This is also good because this is easy to implement, so people with bipolar can get slightly better. A similar study by Arnaud Pouchon in 2023 from Science Direct showed how people with bipolar are more driven by punishment avoidance than reward. They got 45 participants with BPD-1, 34 participants with BPD-2, and 30 healthy controls. They performed an instrumental learning task, which is classical conditioning, designed to separate reward-based from punishment-based reinforcement learning. They used computational modeling to identify the mechanisms around reinforcement learning processes. Performances. There were significant reward learning deficits across bipolar than in the healthy controls. Bipolar had lower sensitivity to rewards than punishment. Bipolar disorder 1 performed better than bipolar disorder 2 during punishment avoidance lessons. These results are consistent with the theory that people with bipolar disorders are hyposensitive to rewards. Now I hear you ask, Kahu, why, oh, how do I treat it? Well, you can't, but here are some ways that you can. You could do cognitive behavioral therapy, family focused therapy, or IPSRT. Yeah. Cognitive behavioral therapy is a type of therapy that helps people identify and challenge bad thoughts or behaviors. So it's your classic run-of-the-mill therapy. A study done by Cardil Osdell In 2021 from PubMed Central proves that cognitive behavioral therapy is extremely helpful to patients with bipolar unless they're going through the peak of mania. And to get this information, they looked at past studies. The study that they did found that CBT builds skills for patients such as identifying negative thoughts, creating plans to cope through early signs of mood shifting, creating a better sleep schedule, strengthening emotional regulation, and problem-solving skills. The benefits to this is that it reduces relapses and hospital stays, it lessens depression and mania symptoms, helps patients regularly take medicine, and helps patients function better socially, which is really good. Maybe I need that. A study done by Ellen Frank in 2007 by PubMed Central, what a shocker, PubMed Central, talks about IPSERT, or interpersonal social rhythm therapy, which is a form of therapy focusing on improving relationships and handling stress. That's the IP part, and the SR part deals with stabilizing daily routines such as sleep, meals, and work. It targets mood triggers, circadian rhythm problems, and not taking medicine properly. They tested IPSERT while patients were still taking therapy and on their medication. They took 18 to 17-year-olds with bipolar who were consistently on mood stabilizers. They were then split into two groups, IPSERT with their usual care and just usual care. And the usual care patients were the controls. They measured mood, anxiety, social functioning, and affective mobility index, AMI, or ARMY. Smartest person in the world. AMI is when they combine the severity and duration of an episode. They did this all over the course of 6 months. The IPSERT group showed significant improvements compared to the controls. IPSERT patients had lower anxiety, depression, mania symptoms, and their AMI scores reduced, which is good. And they function better socially. IPSERT is practical and well liked, which is good because no one wants to hang out with a loner. Can I sit with you guys? Okay. Family-focused therapy is a type of therapy where people with bipolar and their caregivers are educated on bipolar. There is communication enhancement training, problem-solving training, and hand-to-hand combat training. Sorry, confusing with bipolar and the British Secret Intelligence Service. I don't know why. It's not like I was a part of the BSIS. Miss you, Johnny. A paper done by David J. Miklowitz and Bowen Cheng in 2016 from PubMed Central, you'd think I know how to say it, I've said it like 50 times, summarized 30 years of research into family-focused therapy, or FFT. Now I shall summarize their summary. They found that FFT and mood stabilizers sped up the getting better process compared to briefer psychoeducation, which is what FFT is a form of, or medicine that was taken over 1 to 2 years. Research showed that FFT worked better with high expressed emotion family members. High expressed means that they're just like really not that great about bipolar and kind of rude, you know, which is not helpful when you're experiencing stuff. So research on FFT now focuses on children who are likely to get bipolar, making their family better capable of dealing with it. It being bipolar, not the child. That is all for today. Thank you for watching the Little Grey Cells podcast.
A little grey cells.
Delicious.
Drop.